kids, happy Easter. Jesus is alive. Can you clap that with me? Jesus is alive. One more time. Jesus is alive. Oh, see, Sadie, she wants to clap too. She's here. Who is your best friend? Do you know what? This is my best friend when I was growing up. Her name is Leanne Lassiter. And can you see her there? That's me on the right and Leanne on the left. We were in 5th grade. We were best friends and still are good friends to this day. We love to do lots of things together. We made up crazy stories about people. We rode our bikes all over town all day long. We actually went to the same church together, which was kind of funny in my little small town that we ended up at the same church. But we were the best of friends. And we sort of lived across the street from each other, but our elementary school was in between our houses. I lived on one street, and the elementary school was here, and Leanne lived on the other side of the school. So we couldn't see each other in our front yards, but we one time got walkie-talkies, and we would lay in our beds at night and talk to each other across the school. Pause it a minute and have a conversation about your best friend. Kids, tell your parents about your best friend. Why that person is your best friend and what you like about that person. And parents, tell a story about your best friend. And you know, even to this day, one of the things I love the best about Leanne is we laugh. When we get together, we laugh so hard, my stomach hurts. So take a few minutes, pause the video, and talk about best friends. Well, I'm sure you had a nice conversation about your best friends. Well, you know, Jesus had lots of friends, but Peter was his special best friend. And Jesus had died, and his friends were very sad, especially Peter, because Peter was not only sad that Jesus was dead, Peter felt guilty about something he had done. When the guards came and arrested Jesus in the garden, all of his friends and disciples and followers scattered because they didn't want to get arrested too. But not Peter. Peter followed, but not very close. He didn't want people to know for sure that he was with Jesus because he might get arrested too, but he followed at a distance. Finally came to where they were holding Jesus' trial in the house of the high priest, and there was a courtyard, just kind of like a paved area, and there were lots of people out there because lots of people wanted to know what was going on with this. He was watching from the courtyard, and 3 times Peter denied that he even knew who Jesus was. Do you know what it means, denied? That means, oh no, that's not true. I don't do that. So this is what happened. First time, somebody came up to him and said, hey, aren't you one of those disciples of that Jesus? And Peter said, oh no, I'm not. I don't know him. And a second time, someone came up to him and said, I think I've seen you following that Jesus rabbi around. I think you're one of his followers. And Peter said, oh no, I don't know him. And then the third time, someone said, hey, by your accent, you sound like you're from Galilee. I think you're one of Jesus's followers. And Peter said, no, I've never met the man. And right then, Peter remembered that Jesus had predicted that Peter would deny him 3 times. So take a minute and think about, has there ever been a time when you went with the crowd and didn't support your friend? When you denied your friend or even your best friend? See if you can think of a time and share about what it felt like once that happened. So after Jesus was crucified, he was buried in a tomb. That was a certain way that people were buried back then. Friends and relatives would wrap the dead body in strips of expensive linen cloth with spices to help make the smell go away. A cloth was also placed over the face of the dead person. And then the body was laid in a tomb. Often it was a small cave carved out of rock, and a large boulder was rolled in the front. An important reason for using a big boulder was to keep grave robbers away from coming in and stealing the expensive linen and other things that might be in the tomb, and even the body. All of that preparation took a really long time. And that was a problem for Jesus' followers. Jesus was crucified on a Friday, and he died in the afternoon. And just a couple of hours later, the sun was going to go down. That was when the Jewish Sabbath began. Because remember, Jesus and all of his disciples were Jewish. The Sabbath lasted from sundown on Friday until sundown on Saturday, 24 hours. And during that time, the Jews were not allowed to do any work at all. That's why the disciples could not finish on Friday all the preparations to bury Jesus. They had to wait until the Sabbath was over. So early Sunday morning, probably just as the sun started to peek up in the sky, and it was probably tinted kind of pink like it is at sunrise, Mary came to the tomb to finish the work of preparing Jesus' body for burial. But instead, she found that the stone in front of the tomb had been rolled away and Jesus was gone. All Mary saw were the strips of the linen cloth lying on the ground, and she was completely surprised. Can you show me a surprised face? She may have been kind of scared too, because she thought someone had robbed the tomb, even taken Jesus' body somewhere, and she ran back to tell Peter and John. And Peter and John ran to the tomb, and they also saw the linen strips lying on the ground. They went into the tomb and saw the burial cloth that covered Jesus' face was actually neatly folded up. And they were confused because if it had been a robber, they would have taken that cloth. It just didn't make sense. The tomb was empty. You know, Jesus had told his disciples that this was going to happen, but they didn't understand it. They still thought that somebody had taken Jesus' body. But very soon that evening, Jesus appeared to his disciples in a closed room. But Peter kind of stood in the background. He wasn't the one that talked to Jesus. And then even the next day, Jesus came and appeared again. And this time, Thomas was the one that was doing the talking and not Peter. Peter still hadn't had a chance to talk to his best friend Jesus. Peter probably had a big old knot in his stomach. Like when you've ever done something that you feel guilty for or you're wrong, don't you kind of get sick at your stomach? I think so. Well, Peter needed a distraction. And if you remember, Peter was a fisherman by trade. That's how he made his living before he became Jesus' disciple. So Peter decided to go fishing. He thought, if I just get in my boat and fish all night, I can forget about feeling so guilty about Jesus. So Peter took some friends with him, Nathan, Thomas, James, and John, and they went out and they fished all night long. But do you know what? They caught no fish. Zero, nada, nothing. And about dawn, they decided to just row on back because they hadn't caught any fish, and there on the beach is someone. Now, it was Jesus who was on the beach, but Peter and his friends didn't recognize or realize that was Jesus. So Jesus calls out to them as they're coming closer to shore. Do you have any fish? And Peter calls back, no. And Jesus says, throw your nets over to the right side of the boat. And do you know what happened? They caught so many fish, they could hardly haul them in. And as they got closer to the shore, John realized that that was Jesus on the beach. So Peter jumped, and John tells Peter, I think that's Jesus. That looks like Jesus. So Peter jumps in the lake, swims to the shore, and there's Jesus cooking a breakfast of fish and bread over a charcoal fire. And Jesus tells Peter, bring me some of your fish. Well, they had hauled in, the Bible says, over 150 fish, and their net wasn't broken. So Peter brings some more fish to Jesus so there's enough for everyone. And Jesus says, come, let's have breakfast together. And they shared a breakfast of fish and bread. And that's how the disciples knew that Jesus was really alive. Because you only eat if you're alive. He wasn't a ghost because ghosts don't eat fish and bread. And then Jesus said to Peter, now remember, how many times did Peter deny that he knew Jesus? 3 times. So Jesus says to Peter, Peter, do you love me? And Peter says, well, of course, Lord, I do. And Jesus said, feed my lambs. And then Jesus asks again, Peter, do you love me? And Peter says, yes, Lord, feed my sheep. And then Jesus asks a 3rd time, Peter, do you love me? And I bet Peter's feelings were starting to get hurt because he said, I've already told him twice. Why is he asking me again? And then I bet Peter remembered then that he had denied Jesus 3 times. And Peter says, Jesus, you know everything. You know I love you. And Jesus said a 3rd time, feed my sheep. Take care of my sheep and follow me. Oh, imagine Peter's relief and joy. Not only was Jesus alive, can we clap that again? Jesus is alive. Jesus is alive. So Peter was so relieved because he realized that Jesus forgave him and said, take care of my people. He gave Peter that responsibility. You know, it feels so good to be forgiven and back with your best friend. Can you think of a time when that happened to you, when you kind of had a falling out with your best friend, but then one or both of you apologized and forgave each other, and then it was okay? Talk about that for a minute. Forgiveness is one of the greatest Easter gifts that we give, that we can get from God and that we can give to others, because Jesus is alive. Can you clap that with me again? Jesus is alive. Well, do you see all of my crosses I have on my wall here? Do you see all my crosses? I kind of collect them. Do you have crosses in your house? Do you have them in your house hanging on the walls? Well, I want to tell you about a couple of them. This one right here is just an old piece of wood that Mr. Hardy found for me in the pasture. And I said, hey, that looks like a cross, so we hung it on the wall. This one, actually, you know, our church is 160 years old, and there used to be a fireplace in the sanctuary. And that, inside the metal wire there, are broken up pieces of the bricks that made the fireplace in our church. And I also love, I don't know if you can see this one or not, this is really my favorite one, because it's got all those beautiful, beautiful colors and stones on it. And you know, when you think about it, a cross is really kind of a punishment, if you think that's where Jesus died. But now it's the symbol of our faith, because Jesus took something that was bad and terrible and turned it into something that meant love and goodness and friendship. So there's some activities for you to do, and one of them is to make a God's eye. And do you see how the God's eye is 2 sticks of some kind? But this is one I made. See how it's 2 sticks and all colors? I had some string that was all different colors. But do you see it starts out as a cross, and then you can decorate it with whatever string you have laying around. So be sure to check out the activities. It tells you how to make one of these. And I would love to see what you make. Post some pictures on our Facebook page of the God's eyes that you make. So let's say a prayer. Dear God, thank you for Jesus. Thank you for the cross. Thank you for friends like Peter. And thank you for forgiveness. We love you. Amen. Jesus is alive. Jesus is alive. Jesus is alive. Have a fabulous Easter day. I love you all. See you soon. Say Happy Easter, Sadie. Happy Easter to the kids. Sadie says Happy Easter, y'all.